A little while later, there were people who started copying Vigilant. They started dealing with bad guys in their own way, which was pretty different from Ji Yong. Because Ji Yong always wanted to figure out why someone did wrong stuff and could forgive them if they felt sorry. But those who copied him, they were pretty tough on the bad guys without even checking if they did something wrong first. Because a lot of people were copying Vigilant, the media quickly thought that it was happening because people didn't trust the police anymore. The monster, who's also known as Johan, got really mad when he saw the news. He wanted to catch the real Vigilant fast. According to him, Vigilant was just a criminal pretending to be a hero. Ji Yong, who was watching the news too, didn't seem too happy about people copying his actions without thinking. Sean Wook said that folks were copying Vigilant because the media kept talking about him, not really Vigilant's fault. Ji Yong replied that none of this would have happened if the cops did a better job protecting the victims. The next day, Johan asked his fellow police officers to keep searching for the real Vigilant, even though it was getting harder with more people copying him. Johan also said that now, criminals were more scared of Vigilant than the cops. The day after that, Mei Rio seemed like she was trying to get the real Vigilant to do something. She shared news about a truck driver named Ju Ho, who killed a deliveryman, and Ji Yong quickly reacted to the news. At first, Ji Yong tried to check the CCTV footage of what happened with Ju Ho and the deliveryman. In the video, Ju Ho accidentally hit the deliveryman, but instead of taking him to the hospital, Ju Ho intentionally got back in his truck and ran over him until he died. He did it on purpose to avoid paying the medical bills. While Ji Yong was watching the video, Sean Wook surprised him by catching him in the act. Ji Yong quickly made up an excuse, saying he was just organizing work files. But Sean Wook didn't fully trust his explanation and thought Ji Yong might be hiding something. On the following day, which happened to be a holiday, Ju Ho faced the wrath of the deliveryman's angry mother because he seemed to have gotten away with his crime against her son. Even though Ju Ho intentionally killed her son, he arrogantly yelled at and pushed her, showing no remorse. Ji Yong, who was nearby, witnessed this incident. Later that night, Ju Ho was chilling in a hot spring when a fake Vigilant suddenly showed up and killed him without giving him a chance to repent. However, this wasn't the real Vigilant, because Ji Yong was busy helping his neighbor sort scrap materials. His neighbor, an elderly woman named Ra, thanked him for always being so helpful. At the same time, Ji Yong saw the news about Ju Ho's death, and the person responsible claimed to be Vigilante. A little while later, Johan was at the crime scene where Ju Ho was killed. After checking things out, Johan figured out that the one who did it wasn't Vigilant, because their methods were totally different. Meanwhile, another media company, Mei Rio's rival, started reporting on the fake Vigilante's actions. They even tried to lure Vigilant by letting out 3 just-freed criminals. But Mei Rio realized that the Vigilant from yesterday wasn't the real one. Soon after, the fake Vigilant saw the news from the rival media company and didn't waste any time. They coldly killed those 3 recently released criminals and sent a video to the media, saying they'd keep doing their thing. Johan got even more furious after seeing Vigilant's message. He wanted to catch Vigilant immediately, didn't matter if it was the real one or the fake one. Meanwhile, Ji Yong was upset because the heartless actions of the fake Vigilant were damaging his reputation as the real Vigilant. A few days later, Ji Yong's neighbor, Ra, got yelled at by a guy named Sun Do just because she was in his way. Ra tried to move her cart, but Sun Do was so impatient and heartless that he ran over Ra, and she passed away. A store owner saw the whole thing and got into it with Sun Do, but when the cops showed up, they arrested the store owner for getting physical with Sun Do, and Sun Do got taken to the hospital. The next day, Ji Yong found out about this and got super mad, especially since Ra was his neighbor, and he wasn't the only one angry. Sean Wook also got furious after hearing the news. When the holiday came, Wang Jun invited Sonu to go party at a nightclub, but he refused, mentioning some stuff he had to deal with. Ji Yong also turned down the invitation. On the other hand, Mei Rio told her colleagues that the real Vigilant would probably go after the guy who killed Ra, so she asked them to watch the hospital where Sun Do was. Meanwhile, Sun-do was in a hospital room with just one cop guarding him. Then, the cop got a call about his car in the parking lot, saying it got hit. So he rushed out to check, leaving Sun-do alone. When the cop left, Ji-young showed up and attacked Sun-do right away. Ji-young told him he'd forgive him if he confessed to all his crimes during the trial. But if he didn't, Ji-young said he'd come back to deal with him. A little later, Jo-han arrived and had a talk with Ji-young. As Ji-young was walking away outside, suddenly Sun-do fell from a window and died on the spot. The one who did it was the fake vigilante. Ji-young saw the fake vigilante making a quick getaway from the hospital and hopping into an ambulance. Ji-young chased after him until he could get into his car. But instead of being scared, the fake vigilante seemed pretty happy to meet Ji-young finally, because he already knew who Ji-young was. Later, the fake vigilante stopped the ambulance in a quiet spot and said he wanted to team up with Ji-young, offering to help with their actions. But Ji-young wasn't happy about it and attacked the fake vigilante, leading to a fight. Turns out, the fake vigilante knew martial arts almost as well as Ji-young, but in the end, Ji-young got the upper hand. He told the fake vigilante to stop copying him. Meanwhile, Mei-ryo managed to record Ji-young in action, and she'd figure out who the real vigilante was. Back at home, Ji-young got a message from the fake vigilante asking if he needed an alibi for the injuries on his face. Those injuries could cause trouble for Ji-young when he went back to the police academy. But Ji-young just ignored the message. The next day, a conglomerate named Gung-og showed up. He was a young and powerful guy with many large companies. Shockingly, he was the same fake vigilante Ji-young met the night before. Gung-og came to the company where Mei-ryo worked because he heard she had recorded the real vigilante in action. As he walked around, everybody treated Gung-og with a lot of respect. When he met Mei-ryo, he said he came to protect the vigilante's identity and thought Mei-ryo admired what vigilante did. Mei-ryo asked him why he wanted to keep the vigilante's identity secret, and Gung-og said she'd find out the reason eventually. Then he took a flash drive with recordings of the vigilante from Mei-ryo. Meanwhile, Jo-han was at the police academy to meet Professor Jun-yap. While he was walking around, he accidentally ran into Ji-young again. Ji-young got nervous because Jo-han was the guy he saw at the hospital, and Jo-han remembered Ji-young's face too. Not long after, Jo-han met up with Jun-yap and told him that the real vigilante might be a cop. Jo-han asked Jun-yap for information on all his students, and they had a long talk about vigilante. Later that day, when Jun-yap was about to teach, he took attendance and noticed Ji-young's bruised face. Jun-yap asked Ji-young about his injuries, but Ji-young made up a story about having a judo match with his neighbor during the recent break. However, Jun-yap knew about Ji-young's judo skills and didn't believe him. While in the classroom, a staff member came in and told Jun-yap that a cop wanted to see Ji-young. Ji-young got nervous upon hearing this. But when Ji-young and Jun-yap met the cop, it turned out the officer just wanted to introduce Ji-young to a girl named Young-ji who wanted to thank him. Young-ji said Ji-young saved her from some bullies who bothered her the night before. At first, Ji-young didn't get why Young-ji was doing this, but he realized she might be working for Gung-og, the fake vigilante. Ji-young then admitted that he got his injuries from fighting while helping Young-ji, and Jun-yap stopped suspecting him. That night, when Ji-young was alone, he finally replied to Gung-og's message and agreed to meet up next week. Gung-og was thrilled to get Ji-young's message because he admired Ji-young for a long time. A few days later, Mei-ryo got a visit from her old friend, a journalist named Dae-sok. Dae-sok told Mei-ryo that a mafia boss named Sum-do had just been released, even though he did a bunch of bad stuff. All the evidence against Sum-do was in the hands of a celebrity named Jae-huk, and Jae-huk was going to reveal all the evidence on Sum-do the next day. So Dae-sok invited Mei-ryo to go with him to meet Jae-huk the next morning. On the other hand, Sum-do, who had just got out of prison, was on his way to meet two guys who had snitched on him to the cops. He ordered his henchmen to give those two beaten-up guys to some hungry pigs. The next morning, Mei-ryo and Dae-sok went to the place of Jae-huk, who was planning to reveal Sum-do's crimes. But when they got there, they found Jae-huk already dead. They reported it to the police, but the officers who checked the scene said Jae-huk died after do the unthinkable, not murder. Mae-ryo tried to explain how Jae-huk was connected to Sum-do, the recently freed mafia boss. But the cops still didn't believe her story. Outside, Mae-ryo told Dae-sok they needed to investigate the case themselves. She was sure that the person who killed Jae-huk was part of Sum-do's gang. Meanwhile, Ji-young and his two friends had just reached the bus station and were heading home. Not long after, Young-ji, the girl who said Ji-young helped her yesterday, came up to him. Ji-young figured out that Young-ji was the girl sent by Gung-ok. So Ji-young left with Young-ji. But while they were walking, Ji-young noticed Johan following him closely. He asked Young-ji to wait for him while he quickly went to the restroom. Just as Ji-young was heading to the restroom, Johan suddenly showed up in front of him. Johan didn't waste any time and asked Ji-young if he knew about Vigilant. Ji-young tried to stay cool and said he knew about Vigilant because it was all over the news. He even mentioned that he often wrote reports about Vigilant for Jun Yap. But Johan questioned how Vigilant could be writing reports about himself. Johan got closer and threatened Ji-young, warning him that if he kept doing what he was doing, Johan wouldn't hesitate to take him out. Realizing that his secret was out, Ji-young stood his ground and said Vigilant wouldn't back down easily. Johan was about to attack him, but then he remembered his conversation with Jun Yap the day before. Jun Yap had said that if Vigilant's identity turned out to be someone good like Ji-young, it would get more support from the public, and Ji-young was a fellow cop. So Johan and Jun Yap didn't want the public to find out who Vigilant really was, especially if it turned out to be someone good like Ji-young. That might inspire other young cops to become the new Vigilant. While Ji-young and Johan faced off, Gung-ok was secretly watching them both. In the end, Johan let Ji-young go, and Ji-young immediately took Young-ji to a restaurant. Ji-young tried to get information about Gung-ok, but Young-ji wouldn't tell anything about Gung-ok's identity. Meanwhile, Ji-young got a call from Gung-ok and answered it outside the restaurant. Gung-ok asked if Johan now knew Ji-young's identity, and Ji-young confirmed it. He also asked Gung-ok about his true intentions. Gung-ok replied that he wanted to be Ji-young's ally and promised to help him with all his problems. Ji-young agreed to team up with Gung-ok, but he had one condition, that Gung-ok had to copy Johan's phone. Gung-ok smiled because Ji-young's condition was pretty easy for him. Before they hung up, Gung-ok mentioned that Johan was just a puppet ruler. Sometime later, Mae-ryo and Dae-sok went to a port because they thought Jae-huk often hung around there. When they opened one of the containers, they found lots of computers that Jae-huk might have used for an illegal gambling website. Mae-ryo quickly filmed the scene and started looking for information. But suddenly, they were confronted by a guy named Mr. Bung, who was Sum-do's right-hand man. Mae-ryo and Dae-sok tried to hide, but Mr. Bung already knew they were there, and he found them quickly. In a cruel way, Mr. Bung killed Dae-sok, while Mae-ryo tried to escape by getting into a car. Luckily, Mr. Bung couldn't catch Mae-ryo, and she managed to get away from the scene. Not long after, Mae-ryo went back to the port with the police. Surprisingly, the place was all cleaned up, and there wasn't a single computer left from what she saw earlier. Even Dae-sok's body had vanished. Mae-ryo was amazed at how quickly Mr. Bang had cleared the place. She was now sure that Mr. Bang was working for Sum-do. Meanwhile, Johan was in training. Gung-ok's claim that Johan was just a puppet ruler turned out to be true because Johan got a call from his boss, Police General Jae-op. Jae-op asked Johan why he hadn't caught Vigilant yet. Johan asked Jae-op to give him some time and promised he'd catch Vigilant soon. Even though Johan knew Ji-young was Vigilant, he had other plans and didn't want to tell Jae-op. On the other hand, Ji-young was training with his friends. Shortly after, Ji-young got a message from Gung-ok saying he had copied Johan's phone, just like Ji-young had asked. Gung-ok also mentioned he stored the phone in a locker at Incheon Station. An hour later, Gung-ok was seen working hard during his training. He kept pushing himself because he was going to team up with Vigilant. Meanwhile, on his day off, Ji Yong went to the station to get the phone Gungog had left there and took it home. While checking the phone Gungog had given him, Ji Yong got distracted by a news report from Mei Rio. The report talked about the mysterious circumstances of Jade Huck's death and how it was linked to some do. Mei Rio also mentioned that Jade Huck had planned to expose all of some do's crimes before he died. J. Huck Aslow left a message saying that Sumdu had colluded with high-ranking police officials known as rats. Because of this news, Sumdu, who was relaxing, got a call from a police officer referred to as the Rat, who turned out to be General Jayop. Jayop told Sumdu to take immediate action. Thanks to Jayop's influence, the media company where Mei Rio worked got in trouble because of her news report. Not only that, Mei Rio got suspended from her job as a journalist. On the other hand, Sumdu ordered Mr. Bang to send someone to get rid of Mei Rio. A few hours later, as Mei Rio was about to leave, she was suddenly attacked by the person sent by Mr. Bang. Luckily, Johan happened to be there and saved Mei Rio. Johan told her that if she wanted to stay safe, she shouldn't try to lure Vigilante anymore. After that, Johan dealt with the guy called Son Boom, who had attacked Mei Rio. Johan asked Son Boom who had sent him. At first, Son Boom refused to talk, but Johan started beating him. Eventually, Son Boom confessed that he was sent by a man known as the Hitman, alias Mr. Bang. Later, Johan forced Son Boom to take him to Mr. Bang's hideout. When they got there, Mr. Bang was not around, and only his henchmen were present. Despite being outnumbered, Johan showed them a lesson until none of them were standing. Then the police arrived and secured the location. The next day, following Johan's orders, the police declared that they had captured Vigilant the night before, and there wouldn't be any more Vigilant actions. This meant that the people who got beaten up by Johan the previous night were falsely blamed as Vigilant members. The idea was to make the public believe that Vigilant, the hero they had admired, was just a bunch of criminals. Mei Rio, after seeing the news, thought the police were spreading lies about Vigilant. Ji Yong finally realized that Johan didn't want to catch him, but wanted everyone to think Vigilante was a group of criminals. A few days later, Ji Yong got back to his mission by punishing a criminal who had just been released, coincidentally one of Sumdu's henchmen. While doing that, Ji Yong stumbled upon a notebook with records of all Sumdu's assets. Without second thoughts, Ji Yong got rid of the guy. At the same time, Mei Rio got fired by her boss because he thought her reporting on Vigilante was nonsense. Mei Rio tried to defend herself, believing that what the police said about Vigilante yesterday was wrong. However, her boss didn't want to hear her out anymore. As Mei Rio was leaving, she accidentally heard that Vigilante had taken action again. This meant that the police's report about Vigilante yesterday was fake because Vigilante was still active. Mei Rio felt relieved as this silenced her boss, who had just fired her. Meanwhile, Gumnog was also impressed with Ji Yong and cheered for him. On the other hand, Sumdu, who was pretending at a church, got urgent news from his henchmen that Vigilant had taken the notebook with all his assets. Sumdu panicked and told his subordinates to move all his assets abroad. Meanwhile, Johan was on the lookout for Ji Yong. He was really mad because he had gone to great lengths to frame someone else as Vigilant to protect Ji Yong, but Ji Yong had gone back to his Vigilant ways. Johan was also upset because Ji Yong didn't follow his orders to quit being Vigilant. Ji Yong fired back, saying he knew Johan wasn't genuinely concerned and was just following someone else's orders. Ji Yong explained that he would always be vigilant as long as the law was unfair. The law had always been easy on the rich and tough on the poor, so Ji Yong would keep punishing criminals who refused to change. Hearing this, Johan said that if Ji Yong believed he was the only one doing the right thing, he'd become a demon. Ji Yong attacked Johan, but Johan, who was stronger, easily cornered him. Johan then said he believed if Ji Yong stopped being vigilant, he could become a great police officer, even better than Johan himself, instead of becoming a demon. But Ji Yong insisted he didn't care what others thought anymore. If he wanted to fight against demons, he had to become one. Ji Yong challenged Johan to show him what true justice was if he wanted Ji Yong to stop. Johan didn't expect Ji Yong to be so determined, so he eventually let him go. The next day, J-Op summoned Johan, and it turned out that he wanted to fire Johan from his job of catching Vigilant. J-Op also mentioned he had replaced Johan with another police officer. Johan believed that J-Op was firing him not because he couldn't catch Vigilant, but because he was afraid Johan would uncover his connection to Sumdu. Later on, Johan went to talk to Sonboom, hoping to find out if J-Op was also tied to Sumdu's mafia. However, Sonboom claimed he didn't know, and the person who might have that information was Mr. Bang. Unfortunately, Sonboom had no clue about Mr. Bang's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Ji-Yong was getting medical attention and being looked after by Gung-Og because of the beating he took from Johan the day before. Gung-Og was really impressed with Ji-Yong after witnessing the argument between Johan and Ji-Yong. He even snapped a photo with Ji-Yong, considering him his idol. Afterward, Gung-Og left, allowing Ji-Yong to rest. Soon enough, Ji-Yong woke up and watched the news, which was typically reported by Mei Ryo. However, this time, the news from the media company was an apology to Sumdu for damaging his reputation and putting all the blame on Mei Ryo. Seeing this, Ji-Yong immediately messaged Gung-Og, asking him to arrange a special broadcasting studio for Mei Ryo. Gung-Og, with his influential status as a conglomerate, easily made it happen. So, Mei Ryo was summoned by Gung-Og and provided with a dedicated studio where she could report freely. Mei Ryo asked Gung-Og why he was doing this. Gung-Og replied that he didn't want to waste what Vigilant had achieved. After that, Mei Ryo promptly started her first report, stating that she would keep exposing the crimes committed by Sumdu and General Rat. She also made it clear that she would never stop, no matter what. If anything happened to her, it would be evident that someone didn't want her reporting to be known by everyone. General J-Op and Sumdu, as they watched Mei Ryo's broadcast, were in a state of panic. They couldn't believe they were being disrupted so severely. Later on, a new police officer named Yin Gil, who was now leading a new team that replaced Jo Hyun. Yin Gil was a smart guy and had martial arts skills almost as good as Jo Hyun's. The following day, Ji-Yong, who had recovered, came back home. He tried to open the notebook he had taken from the guy he had eliminated earlier and found out that Sumdu and General J-Op were hiding their assets in a church where Sumdu often put on a show. Without wasting any time, Ji-Yong rushed to the church and managed to get a flash drive containing evidence of Sumdu's crimes. But while Ji-Yong was doing this, someone noticed his actions, and he quickly chased after them. It turned out the person was Gung-Og, and he explained that he was just curious about what Ji-Yong was up to because he really admired him. Then they had a conversation, and Ji-Yong truly saw Gung-Og as his ally, which made him very happy. Ji-Yong gave Gung-Og the flash drive he had obtained, asking him to pass it on to Mei Ryo. Before leaving, Gung-Og promised to support Ji-Yong no matter what. The next day, when Jun Yap entered his office, he was surprised to see Yin Gil already there. Yin Gil explained that he had come to request student data because he suspected that Vigilante might be a police officer. At the same time, Ji-Yong showed up to let Jun Yap know that the students were waiting for him in the classroom. Yin Gil, upon seeing Ji-Yong, looked at him seriously and then left, but he mentioned he would be back. On a holiday, Ji-Yong went to a church with the intention of eliminating the priest named Jong-un, who was one of Sumdu's right-hand men in his criminal activities. After Ji-Yong successfully took down Jong-un, Vigilante's reputation suffered in the eyes of the public because Jong-un was a well-known and kind-hearted priest. Moreover, Vigilante carried out this act without a clear reason. On the other hand, Sumdu was boiling with anger because Jong-un was the only one who knew where all his hidden assets were. So, Samdu told General Jae Hyab to hold off on any action for the next 5 days because he planned to get rid of Mei Ryo, Vigilante, and Jo Hyun. Samdu believed that Jo Hyun could pose a threat to them. Meanwhile, Mei Ryo met up with Gung-Og to give him a flash drive that Ji-Yong had passed on to her, explaining why Vigilante had taken out Jong-un. Mei Ryo had a feeling that Gung-Og might already know Vigilante's true identity, but she didn't bring it up. That night, Mei Ryo started broadcasting the reason behind Vigilante's actions against Jong-un. However, just as she was about to reveal the contents of the flash drive Gangok gave her, her broadcast was abruptly interrupted, and it turned out to be Jo Hyun. He warned Rio that if she continued reporting on Sumdu, it could be deadly for her. But Rio responded that she wasn't naive and understood the risks. Eventually, Johan decided to leave, and as he was getting into his car, he was suddenly attacked by two men. These two men were Mr. Bang and one of his highly skilled henchmen. After a fierce fight, Mr. Bang, armed with a sharp weapon, managed to injure Jo Hyun. Just as Mr. Bang was about to finish him off, Vigilant appeared out of nowhere, causing Mr. Bang and his henchmen to flee. The next day, Johan was seen lying in the hospital. Meanwhile, Gungog, who knew that Ji Yong had saved Johan, asked why Ji Yong had done it. Ji Yong replied that he wanted to make Johan just like him, a vigilant who delivered his own form of justice. On the other hand, Samdu was pretty mad at Mr. Bang because he didn't manage to get rid of Jo Hyun. Mr. Bang could only say sorry to Samdu. That night, it was clear that Samdu's henchmen were attempting to transfer his virtual money assets. But just as they were doing that, there was an explosion and Ji Yong showed up. After Ji Yong dealt with them, he took Samdu's virtual money, just like he usually did. Following this, Rio immediately went broadcasting live to announce that Vigilant was demanding Samdu and General Rat to confess all their crimes. If they didn't, Ji Yong would donate all the virtual money to every orphanage. Afterward, Ji Yong contacted Gungog and asked him to protect Rio because she was sure to become Samdu's target. Gungog agreed right away. While they were talking, Sunwook secretly watched Ji Yong. A bit later, Samdu's henchmen showed up at the building where Rio was broadcasting. They were sent to eliminate Rio, who had just made a broadcast threatening Samdu and Jayop. Rio, realizing she was about to be surrounded, quickly set up several cameras in the room. As Samdu's henchmen were tearing apart Rio's broadcasting studio, Rio secretly went live on air. This allowed everyone, including Yen Gil, the head of the regional team who replaced Johan, to witness what was happening. But eventually, Samdu's crew caught Rio, and they smashed her phone, which she used for the broadcast. They were about to take her away for a quick execution when Vigilant suddenly showed up. However, it turned out to be Gungog, who had come to rescue Rio on Ji Yong's orders. Gungog mercilessly took them all down, leaving only one of Samdu's henchmen alive. At first, Rio suspected that Gungog might be Vigilant, but Gungog explained that he was just following Vigilant's orders. Shortly after that, the police led by Yin Gil arrived, but when they entered the broadcasting studio, everything seemed back to normal. Yin Gil then took Rio to the police station for questioning. On the other hand, Ji Yong sneaked out of the dormitory just to make sure Rio was safe. He felt relieved when he saw that she was safe and with Yin Gil. At the police station, Yin Gil asked Rio about who had saved her. He suspected that she might have been working with Vigilant all along, and the person who rescued her was Vigilant. However, Rio simply replied that she didn't know if that person was Vigilant or not, but they had saved her. After being questioned, Rio went back to her apartment and relaxed with a warm bath, but not long after, her apartment's lights suddenly went out. The next day, while Ji Yong was in class, Yin Gil came to talk to him, asking for information. They ended up in Jun Yap's office, and Yin Gil straight up asked Ji Yong if he was Vigilant. Ji Yong politely questioned why he was being accused and asked for proof. Yin Gil mentioned that Vigilant had a similar build to Ji Yong, and data on Johan's computer pointed to him. He'd also asked about Ji Yong's whereabouts the previous night, knowing he had left the dormitory. Yin Gil suspected Ji Yong had gone to rescue Rio. Ji Yong admitted he left the dormitory, but said it was a private matter. Jun Yap tried to defend Ji Yong, asking Yin Gil to find strong evidence before accusing him. However, Yin Gil said everything would be revealed soon because the virtual money assets stolen by Vigilant were traced back to the police academy. The Central Police team was tracking it and would reveal everything tomorrow. On the following holiday, Ji Yong was seen planning something with Gungog, but then he got a call from Sunwook, who hadn't returned from the police academy dormitory. Sean Wook informed Ji Yong that Yen Gil and the police were searching all the rooms at the academy. Ji Yong couldn't do anything but stay silent. On the other hand, while searching Ji Yong's dormitory, Yen Gil was suddenly told by a subordinate that the ID team had pinpointed the phone's location. Surprisingly, it led them to General Jaop's office. Without hesitation, Yen Gil broke into the office to search for evidence. Meanwhile, Ji Yong told Gung-ok that the police, led by Yen Gil, were searching the academy. He also revealed that he purposely lured Yen Gil by accessing Sumdu's virtual money at the police academy using a special phone General Jaop typically used to talk to Sumdu. Gung-ok was impressed by Ji Yong's cleverness. On the other side, Yen Gil finally found the phone. General Jaop entered and caught Yen Gil trying to take his phone. General Jaop dismissed everyone else and wanted a private chat with Yen Gil. General Jaop was worried because he often used that phone to talk to Sumdu. General Jaop offered Yen Gil money or a high-ranking position if he didn't take the phone. But Yen Gil, being an honest cop, said he only wanted to do his duty as a police officer. He also said he would give the phone directly to the special digital forensics team to uncover everything. After Yen Gil left, General Jaop immediately ordered his men to get rid of Yen Gil before he could hand over the phone to the forensics team. Yen Gil was on his way to the forensics office, but not long after, he was suddenly hit by a truck, causing his car to flip over. In the end, Yen Gil met his demise at the hands of General Jaop's henchmen. On the other hand, Johan was still recovering from his injuries. It didn't take long before he was told that Yen Gil had passed away. Johan felt a deep sense of loss because Yen Gil was a close friend. That same night, Ji Yong didn't expect that his plan to trap General Jaop would result in Yen Gil's death. When Ji Yong was about to leave, Johan suddenly confronted him. Jo Hyun asked Ji Yong if he had killed Yen Gil. Ji Yong immediately confessed everything to Jo Hyun. But even after hearing the full story, Jo Hyun still urged Ji Yong to stop being vigilant. Ji Yong replied that if Johan wanted to stop him, he should kill him now, and Ji Yong wouldn't resist. If Johan refused to kill him, then they had to work together to expose all of General Jaop's crimes. Meanwhile, Mr. Bung and his men successfully kidnapped Mai Ryo. The next day, Gung-ok and his team tried to unlock Mai Ryo's apartment because she hadn't been in touch. After opening the door, they were shocked to find the apartment in a mess, realizing that Mai Ryo had been abducted. Gung-ok immediately contacted Ji Yong to inform him of the situation. Meanwhile, Mai Ryo found herself being interrogated by Mr. Bung, who was desperately trying to uncover Vigilant's true identity. However, Mai Ryo, who still didn't know about Vigilant's real identity, had nothing to reveal. Not long after, Vigilant proposed a deal to Sumdu. He would exchange Mai Ryo for the access to the virtual money he had taken earlier. Sumdu found this offer intriguing, and they agreed to meet at Seoul Stadium the following night. Sumdu then contacted Mr. Bung and instructed him to bring Mai Ryo to the stadium. However, Mr. Bang demanded a hefty price for his cooperation, which Sumdu reluctantly agreed to. On the other hand, Ji Yong was busy planning with Gung-ok, but little did they know that Sean Wook was secretly spying on them. The next day, Mr. Bang broke the news to Mai Ryo that she would be exchanged for access to the virtual money. Mai Ryo couldn't help but burst into laughter at the unexpected twist. Not long after, Sumdu and his henchmen arrived early at Seoul Stadium to take control of the CCTV cameras. However, during the exchange night, they were taken by surprise when everyone showed up dressed as Vigilant. There was also a music festival happening inside the stadium. Ji Yong had orchestrated this plan with the help of Gung-ok, the wealthy conglomerate who could easily organize festivals with his vast resources. Meanwhile, Mr. Bang and his crew had arrived at the location with Mai Ryo. The music festival inside Seoul Stadium had already started. Mr. Bang brought Mai Ryo to search for Vigilant, while Sumdu and Mr. Bang observed her from a distance. However, Ji Yong managed to outsmart Mr. Bang, allowing him to take Mai Ryo away from the crowd to the parking area. On the other hand, Gung-ok intentionally approached Sumdu and his henchmen, luring them into a chase that led to the parking lot. Meanwhile, Ji Yong asked My Rio to conduct a live broadcast. Later, Ji Yong climbed on top of a bus to confront Mr. Bang's men. Eventually, Mr. Bang himself arrived to assist his men in their confrontation with Ji Yong. Jo-han watched My Rio's broadcast and finally learned about Ji Yong's current actions. Meanwhile, General Jaop was having dinner with his superior, Song Chol. Song Chol was a high-ranking police general with 4 stars. Surprisingly, all of General Jaop's criminal activities were carried out under Song Chol's orders because Song Chol was planning to run for president. Shortly after, Song Chol's men informed him that Vigilant and Sumdu's group were engaged in a fight at Seoul Stadium. Upon hearing this, Song Chol immediately ordered General Jaop to go to the stadium and handle the situation. Back at the scene with Sumdu's group, they had surrounded Gung-ok and Ji Yong. Amidst the battle, a car suddenly appeared and rammed into Mr. Bang. Behind the wheel was Jo-hyun, accompanied by Sun Bum and one of their friends. Jo-hyun demanded that Samdu and his men surrender. However, Samdu refused, confident in the large number of henchmen at his disposal, and he immediately ordered them to attack Jo-hyun. Meanwhile, Ji Yong was utterly exhausted, and Sumdu was relentlessly attacking him from close quarters. It seemed Ji Yong was on the brink of being defeated when an unexpected savior intervened. Unfortunately, this act of heroism resulted in the savior being stabbed by Sumdu. Surprisingly, the person who came to Ji Yong's rescue was Sun-wook. Sin-wook had already figured out that Ji Yong was the vigilante. Just then, the police arrived to intervene and stop the conflict. However, Sumdu swiftly made his escape, heading towards an underground chamber. Ji Yong asked My Rio to assist Sun-wook while he pursued Sumdu. Not long after, Ji Yong entered the underground chamber, while Gung-ok tried to hold off Sumdu's henchmen who were chasing Ji Yong. Inside the underground chamber, Ji Yong found himself facing off against Sumdu and Mr. Bang. But before long, Jo-han arrived to support Ji Yong. Jo-han confronted Mr. Bang, while Ji Yong engaged in a fierce battle with Sumdu. Their fight was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of General Jaop. General Jaop decided that Sumdu had failed and took swift action to eliminate him. Afterward, he opened a water channel, attempting to drown Ji Yong, Jo-han, and Mr. Bang, and started shooting at them. Fortunately, General Jaop's shots missed their mark. While he was reloading, Ji Yong quickly climbed up and cornered him. Ji Yong managed to subdue General Jaop, but was about to finish him off. However, Jo-han intervened, wanting to bring General Jaop to face justice. Meanwhile, Mr. Bang challenged Ji Yong and Jo-han, leading to a fight between the 3 of them. Unexpectedly, General Jaop retrieved his pistol and shot Ji Yong, Jo-han, and Mr. Bang. Fortunately, Jo-han was only wounded in the hand, allowing him to approach and eliminate General Jaop without hesitation. The following day, Gung-ok regained consciousness and immediately asked about Ji Yong. His men reassured him that Ji Yong was safe. Meanwhile, Ji Yong mourned the loss of Sun-wook, who tragically died in the previous incident. My Rio confided in Jo-hyun that now it wasn't just Ji Yong who was the vigilant, but also Jo-hyun. The next day, General Song Chol announced that General Jaop had died due to an attack by a criminal group. Ji Yong realized that the mastermind behind all of Sumdu and General Jaop's crimes was General Song Chol. The scene then showing the new police officers, including Ji Yong, were taking their oath. But when it was time to pledge loyalty to the country and their superiors, Ji Yong stayed quiet. And that's how the Vigilant series concluded. Moral lesson from the story: if you ever decide to stage an epic showdown at a music fest in a big stadium, just remember to call in your entire crew to dress up as Vigilant to confuse the bad guys and hire a wealthy conglomerate to organize it all.